안녕하세요. 인사이트 코리아입니다. 첫 문장부터 사로잡는 책, 최근 읽은 책 중 꼭 공유하고 싶은 책, 오바마 전 대통령이 자신의 개인 SNS에 올렸던 말입니다. 이러한 찬사의 주인공은 출판 당시 뉴욕타임즈와 BBC에서 올해의 책으로 선정되었던 한국인들의 분노와 슬픔, 그리고 회복과 연민에 대한 이야기를 담은 파친코입니다. 이 책은 어릴 적 미국으로 이민 간 한국계 이민진 작가의 소설로 일제강점기부터 1980년대까지 일제강점기에 일본으로 이주한 한국인들이 4대에 걸쳐 처절하게 하지만 굳건하게 살아가는 이야기를 다룹니다. 2017년에 충간되었지만 2020년 애플TV에서 이민호, 윤여정 등 유명 한국 배우들과 함께 본격적으로 대작 드라마로 만들기로 발표하면서 최근 다시금 미국 전역에서 광풍을 불러일으켰고 많은 이들을 눈물 짓게 만들고 있는 것인데요. 최근 해외 커뮤니티에는 일제강점기 당시 찍힌 사진 한 장이 올라왔다가 파친코 이야기가 소환될 정도이며 최근 새로 읽은 해외 네티즌들이 이민진 작가의 역사소설 올해 읽은 것 중 가장 좋았던 책이야 라며 극찬을 하고 파친코 같은 책 없을까요? 라며 추천해달라는 글들을 올리고 있습니다. 며칠 전에는 한국의 옛날 사진, 일제강점기 당시의 기생이라는 제목으로 고운 얼굴의 기생이 한복을 입고 앉아있는 사진이 게시되었는데요. 당당한 자세, 사진 너머로도 빛나는 그녀의 자신감을 좀 봐 라는 칭찬들도 있었지만 라틴계 미국인인데 나 지금 파친코 읽고 있거든. 근데 세상에나 당신은 정말 끔찍한 시기였더라. 나는 이 소설을 읽기 전에는 일본의 식민주의에 대해 전혀 배운 적이 없었고 이 책을 읽으면서 너무 충격받았어. 사진에서 보이는 이 레이디의 당당함과 자신감은 정말 존경스러워. 악몽 같은 시간 동안을 살아냈을 한국의 여왕들에게 존경을 보냅니다. 라는 댓글들이 달린 것입니다. 이렇게 미국 전역을 휩쓸다 보니 이민진 작가는 여러 인터뷰 방송에 출연한 것은 물론 유수의 명문대학교에 초청받아 강연을 하기도 했는데요. 하버드대학교에서는 한국인들은 사람인가요? 라는 주제로 이민진 작가의 차기작에 대해 그리고 한국인은 과연 어떤 사람들인가를 강연한 바 있습니다. 과연 미국 전역을 울린 이민진 작가가 말하는 한국인들은 어떤 사람일까요? 지금부터 소개해드리겠습니다.
I have written about Koreans for most of my life, and I've been asked why I write about Koreans. And it seems like such a strange question to me, because why wouldn't I write about Koreans? To me, Koreans are mothers and fathers and daughters and sons. About a year and a half ago, a European journalist interviewed me, and he asked me this question: what are Koreans like? What are Koreans like? Now, the journalist meant well. I think he was trying to help Koreans, help us tell our side of the story. So he was asking a writer of Korean ethnicity to explain my tribe. And as you know, if and whenever Korea is discussed in the media, especially in the mainstream news, it is so often about that one young Korean man from the north who is trying to hold on to his power and is taking desperate measures in order to do so. And he does this much in the vein of his father and his grandfather have done. So his story is a story of a dynasty, which means that you know that at its root, it is a story about a family. People around the world who want to see more of Koreans get such a small and dark window, and that is indeed a shame. So, what are Koreans like? I thought about the immensity of this question, the fallacy behind it, and the overwhelming likelihood of falling into stereotypes in answering him. And yet, not to reply would have been rude, because I had spent some time with this journalist, and I knew he was not a bad person. So I answered him. I told him that Koreans like to dance. Dance. I was only half kidding. 3 months ago, I turned 50. It's hard to believe, isn't it? And because I write so much about Koreans and have done so for so many decades, I have now encountered thousands of Koreans around the world. And wherever I go, I do my best to take the temperature of Koreans from every age and group. So if you follow Koreans in the news, you can find some widespread generalizations about the peninsula and its people. And they go like this. You will know that there was a miracle on the Han, a phrase used to explain South Korea's incredible, superhuman economic success as it emerged from a catastrophic post-colonial, post-war poverty, and all in a matter of a few decades. Koreans are global leaders in internet speed, shipbuilding, steel, the manufacture of consumer electronics, automobiles, memory chips, and semiconductors. South Korea leads the PISA scores, literacy, secondary and tertiary education, and Korea has produced world-class athletes, filmmakers, musicians, and artists. South Koreans also have the highest rates in plastic surgery, suicide, cryptocurrency speculation, youth dissatisfaction, and elderly poverty. But Koreans like to dance. And if you go to festivals or weddings, you will see Korean grandmothers moving their arms elegantly and swaying their shoulders and their heads. Koreans have excellent rhythm, Ani. It's a little inside joke. Koreans can be funny, we like to sing, and we love to eat. And we like a little dazzle. And if you know a bit about the Korean psyche, you know that we're known for carrying this thing, this feeling called Han, defined as a specific kind of inexpressible anguish that comes from having suffered collectively as a people. And then there's nunchi, a kind of emotional intelligence or the ability to perceive subtext. And there's also the concept of jang, my favorite, the quality of affection and attachment that people develop with time and common experience. In my experience, the Koreans that I know are very romantic. They are full of love and intensity, and they're physical in their expression. I wanted to know what is the most important value for Koreans, not just in Korea, but around the world. And I sensed what it was. Koreans value education. They value it like nothing else. For Koreans, since the Shilla Kingdom, when national exams were first administered to candidates to become bureaucrats, Koreans have regarded education as a gateway and a path to progress, distinction, and proof of one's value. Kingdoms have risen and fallen in Korea. This peninsula, attached to China, located east of Japan and south of Russia. The nation was colonized by Japan and then later split by foreign powers. And then from 1950 to 1953, not a long time ago, the two Koreas fought a civil war, which killed 2 million Korean men, women, and children, over 600,000 Chinese, and over 50,000 Americans. The ancient civilized nation, which is now made up of two republics, each only 71 years old, has suffered through dictators, the repression of human rights, the systematic torture and murder of university students and labor organizers. And many South Korean business leaders have done incredibly good things for their nations. And others have sought only personal gain and profited through corruption. South Korea is growing up to be a great democratic nation, as evidenced through the recent candlelight revolution. And they have excellent voting turnout. How did Koreans become global players? And how did it happen so fast? And if you ask Koreans around the world, nearly everyone will mention that Koreans are willing to figure things out, and they will work around rigid systems. We will read, we will study, we will try to solve problems. Koreans will go to great lengths to learn more. In short, Koreans care immensely about education. Education is a vital subject to every living creature. So from birth, every infant has to learn skills, and gradually she will learn how to hold her head up and crawl and express herself. So if everyone needs an education, then how is the modern Korean value of education different? Now, from its Confucian roots for well over 1,000 years, Koreans have trusted that one's status in life can be improved markedly by educational achievement. Despite the calamities that Korea has suffered, or perhaps because of the calamities that Koreans have endured, even as recently as the Asian financial crisis and the IMF bailout, education has become even more valued in South Korea. In South Korea today, it is not sufficient to send one's child to school. No. Rather, the child will begin to get supplemental education, private tutoring, starting at the age of 4. South Korean high school students sleep on average 5 hours a day, which means some sleep less. And when they are awake, they are studying. Now, my third novel, which I'm researching and writing here, and it is about the value of education for Koreans around the world. Now, it may be true that a Korean child studies from dawn to dusk, and that a Korean parent may impoverish himself to support his child's studies. I notice that people seem alarmed at my findings, and sometimes I share your alarm. However, I've noticed that every single Korean I've spoken with has specific wishes and reasons, so I try never to judge. I try to ask more questions, and I consider his point of view. I worry a great deal about how Koreans are perceived, not because I think Koreans are ideal. I worry because when I encounter the way Koreans are perceived in the world by non-Koreans and diasporic Koreans, I find that the Koreans don't get to tell their full story. And I'm hoping that you and I can be more fair if we realize that Koreans have achieved impressive outcomes and they care intensely about education because they have good reason. Why? Why do Koreans care so much about education? Well, one reason is that Koreans want power, no less than any of us in this room. Koreans want power because the average Korean, whether she lives in Busan or Toronto, may feel less than powerful. And who among us would deny that we sometimes feel less than powerful and that sometimes life can feel like a dead end? So I ask myself, what will a mother do when she wants her child to have a little more than she has? And how is she different from me? And how is she different from us? I am overwhelmed by the complexity of my subject. And because I realize that I am not writing about education, the diaspora, or Koreans, I'm writing about humans. And we are very complicated. We are vulnerable. We are needy. And we are frightened. We make terrible choices. And we live with regrets. And more often than not, we cannot give voice to our most important feelings. When the European journalist asked me the question, what are Koreans like? What I heard in his question was really the question, are Koreans human? Are they like me? So I had told him that Koreans like to dance. And here, let me explain more fully what I meant. Dance is a physical allegory of our emotions. Our bodies are telling our heart's stories without using words. Perhaps the journalist thought that I was alluding to the extraordinary choreography and the dramatic execution of synchronized movements of K-pop. I was not. I was talking about the old woman who wants to roll her shoulders while closing her eyes. I am talking about ordinary people dancing. Less than 100 years ago, nearly all the women in Korea were illiterate. In my mind, I was thinking, why is it that the poor old Korean woman likes to dance? Why is that? Perhaps, despite all the constrictions of a nation geographically bound by superpowers, and despite all the difficulties, Koreans from many corners like to dance because we're human and our physical bodies crave expression. Even with the fear of censure and the fear of shame and the fear of exclusion, we will express ourselves fully, even if it is for just one dance. And we will do it with rhythm, more than our spectacular accomplishments or our catastrophic failures. Perhaps it is our daily bodies, our yearnings, our very weakness, and our wish for expression that makes us human. And I hope that is what I will carry with me as I continue to write about us. Thank you.
따뜻한 마음과 논리력, 그리고 필력, 위트 있고 매력적인 화술과 귀여운 웃음까지 갖춰 더욱 멋진 이민진 작가의 차기작 아메리칸 학원도 응원하며 기다리겠습니다. 지금까지 인사이트 코리아였습니다. 감사합니다.